we're working on several things right now. And so I want to touch on them all and then save the last bit of time for you to complete these evidence evaluations. Finding evidence it can be challenging, and then analyzing it through the lens of Ruggiero to evaluate it, that is also tough. So let's talk about the glossary really quickly. Let's talk about the essay that you're just now starting to brainstorm. And then let me put you in your breakout rooms. Yeah. So what's due this Saturday? I'm still not grading the glossaries, and I saw that some of the groups have already posted the glossaries, which is awesome. I won't look at them until Sunday, and so you might as well put the link because the link's not going to change. So every group member is adding at least 6 authoritative definitions, clarifying quotations or examples. That means since you should have already had 2, you're going to have 8 per person. If you had added some terms that were vocabulary words rather than discipline-specific terms that were related to understanding the effects of diversity in literacy education, then you'll need to take those vocabulary terms out and perhaps add definitions to some terms that some other students were working on, or add a term from the ones that I added. I know that some of you have added anti-racist or anti-racism. I think somebody added acculturation, which I don't believe was in Barone and Grimm. And so you're doing the work. Again, it seems odd because who asks you to do this kind of stuff? But you can see how just looking for the definitions is giving a more nuanced meaning to this. So by Saturday, each student should have 8 definitions. Except for definitions from Barone and Grimm and Dees, Godbey, and Ozias, these should be gathered from the library database, which means that you're not just going onto Google and finding definitions from Oxford or Merriam-Webster. So you're looking at references from the database on the library. I know some of you have looked at books. Some of you have accessed encyclopedic definitions. Some of you have accessed dictionary definitions from academic dictionaries. And some of you have accessed definitions from other research papers. And so I'm checking, like your practice work on the glossary and giving you feedback. You can have scholarly definitions, but not standard definitions. And every source needs an MLA citation and in-text documentation. So if there's a page number with that, you're going to want to put that in parentheses. Doing it as you go saves time later on. I know that in my undergrad, I did not learn that trick. And, as I was finishing up my essay, I was also trying to find page numbers and create citations. There are a lot of different formatting types. And it's really important that you choose the correct formatting type. Let me take you to another page. This one, I looked up color blindness. And this is the page that I started with. Actually, this is how it started. I had APA, and I had to scroll down I mean, here's MLA 7th edition, but 7th edition ended in 2016. I need MLA 8th edition. And this is what I want to copy paste for my citation. When everything's said and done, you will lose points for not having correct citations. It's not going to be a lot of points, but I will tell you, professors vary on, like what they consider correct or what they don't consider correct. I remember a few years ago, my daughter was doing her undergrad at SDSU, and she took a class and she got marked down an entire letter grade for not having correct citations. Now, because I'm her mom and I told her to make sure that she had them correct, hers were actually correct. And she was able to go to the TA who was grading and show in the handbook that it was all good and she got her grade back. But if you don't know, you'll lose out. And I suspect that the fact that I'm seeing incorrect citations still means that you're not entirely sure. And so make sure that you're going to the drop-down menu. I actually had slides for that. Make sure that you go to the drop-down menu and that you choose the correct citation. Because I know this is weird. I know this can feel I don't think you're seeing my slideshow. I think you're seeing citations. Let me see if I can get back to that. I hate it when the oh dear. Oh, you are seeing my slideshow. Okay, good, good, good. Any questions about the glossary right now, or about any questions about the glossary?
Do we add the date accessed at the end of the citation?
You know, I think that you should. I see some citations that don't have the access date, and I see some that do. So I recommend that you do that, even if, I mean, that won't be on the one that you copy paste. Also, I'm noticing that the URL is not here, and the URL is required. This, I mean, yeah, okay. So you're looking at this. Is what you see MLA 8th edition? Is that what you see on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay. The URL is not here, and neither is the access date. That means that this citation is incorrect. If you're accessing something on the internet, you have to add the URL. I will put a slide deck on Canvas that has standard definitions. I will add that. Definitely by tomorrow morning. I know I've got meetings all afternoon, so it'll probably not be in there. Sometimes these citations are not entirely correct. You'll notice that this doesn't have hanging indentation, and you always have to have hanging indentation. So I don't know why I didn't notice that previously. Yeah, so I've been putting comments on those library databases. You did not lose points if I put a comment there, but make note of the comments I give you regarding that. Any other questions on this? Okay. So let's talk about planning the essays. You basically are going to have two parts to this essay. One is going to be your literacy narrative, where you are using that inquiry question that you choose and finding a way to answer it through, you're finding a way to answer it through your own stories. And you're writing in a way that would be appealing for an audience of your peers. So you're doing a lot of work there. This is, I am not your audience. I am not your audience. You're writing in a way that will make this interesting to other 18, 19, and 20-year-olds. I'm asking you to begin planning. And then the second part of your essay is bringing new understanding by using Barron and Grimm as a lens through which to view your experiences. For example, if I want to write an essay about how I acquired my literacy or what literacy means to me, I'm brainstorming a lot of things. I'm remembering when I was in first grade and I got put into the slow group, like the ones that weren't, like already reading or already, like doing a really good job. Why did I get put in the slow group? I don't know, but it bothered me immensely as a 6-year-old because I knew. But I remember my dad taking me to the bookstore every weekend, and he'd give me 50 cents and I could buy a book. It was a really long time ago. Books were cheap. I remember I lived in Hawaii, and I would go to the library every week and check out every single book I could find on the monarchy in Hawaii, because I wanted to know the history of Hawaii. I remember my books were largely mystery books, um, mystery books, and then cultural books, books about people from other countries, understanding the history of other countries. And that continued. And my dad was always giving me money for books. And we had books in our house all over the place. And I got in trouble for reading because I was supposed to be cleaning. And so if I were to, like you can see, I'm thinking about who's involved in my literacy, how I acquired my literacy, what it meant to me. And it meant, like learning about the world beyond me. And I can examine that. I can tell that story in a way that shows, like the literacy opens up windows into worlds beyond where I am. But then I can start to examine it through that mainstream dominant culture that I am in, and show that it opened a way out of that if I were willing to look at it. But we have to know that it's there, which I did not. It was interesting to me. It was theoretical. It was sort of that theoretical diversity that Barron and Grimm talk about, instead of productive literacy. Like, what can these people add to my mind? And even as I'm talking about this, you can see my brain is just flying as I think about all these random details. And ultimately, what I want to do is then I want to go to this lens exercise, copy document, and I want to start filling this out. You'll see the form here. You can name it, you can save it as a PDF, or you can post the URL. Make sure the sharing capabilities allow me to see it. If you don't share it with me or make it available for all people to see it, I won't be able to do that. So how do you do this? Name your literacy question. And this is on the prompt. And then do one of these things. Create a free write in which you just randomly write what you remember about literacy, asking those questions. Or you can just answer with bullets. I don't really care, like cluster brainstorming. And once you have that, you start thinking about, like what lenses work. So choose at least 3 quotations related to the same theme or topic, one that could be relevant to the details from your own story. And then analyze or paraphrase what that quotation means in your own words. And then choose a detail from your own story. Like I could choose what were the types of books I was reading. I think I read everything on, like the British monarchy, the history, Mary Queen of Scots, really interested in her for some reason, all the monarchy in Hawaii. I was living in Hawaii, so, and we had visited Iolani Palace on a field trip, and, so everything was super interesting to me. And then I'm drawing conclusions. So if I'm saying theoretical diversity, here's the detail of how I'm reading about other cultures. And conclusions I draw is that they were interesting to me in a theoretical way. They were different than my own world, but my own world seemed normal. This spreadsheet is on Canvas. Let me go to, you're looking at week 9 right now. This is actually due tomorrow. I know this is my version. I'm sorry. So here, this is week 9. Lens exercise. And if you click on this link, complete this chart, you'll get taken to the form.
Yeah, sorry, I have another question.
Yeah.
So is this lens exercise different than the other spreadsheet that we have to do?
Which other spreadsheet are you talking about?
In module 9, it says like complete spreadsheet or something.
I think I know what you mean. This one?
Yeah.
This is what we're going to do the rest of class.
Okay, but then the lens one that you just showed us, that's different.
Yeah, this is going to be really different. This is just identifying evidence in Barron and Graham. But this, sorry, just scroll down to next. This is prepping for your essay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. This essay requires you, I asked you in the, like after you watched the brain, like how Callie Linfor wrote her essay and the brainstorming, how she did it. A lot of you said, like this is so very different from the way I normally do my essays. And on a lot of your papers, what I wrote is, if we're writing an essay where we're recapping what somebody else has said, that linear approach might actually work. But if you want to add to the conversation, if you want to develop new content that isn't just repeating what others have said, you have to really ask questions. You don't want to necessarily go to the most obvious thing that somebody can come up with on their own. And certainly your own stories, like building off your own stories starts there. But I can definitely go for the standard stuff if I want to tell my own literacy narrative. So answering a question will be helpful. Thinking about random things. I didn't remember my dad giving me 50 cents to buy a book every single weekend. I didn't remember going to the library in Hawaii. Remember, I'm I lived in Hawaii in GASP 1966 to 1969, which is a really long time ago. So I hadn't thought about living in Hawaii for a really long time. And then as I started remembering my teachers and the block I lived on and, like what it was like, I don't remember a lot about my classes, but I remember the library. And it was small, but it had a lot of books on Hawaiian monarchy. I just wanted kings and queens. I was really into fairy tales, which always had kings and queens. So, um, any questions about this exercise? Or about the essay that's coming up? Okay. There are a lot of ways you can organize this essay, and you're not writing it yet. We'll talk about drafting next week, but there are a lot of ways you can organize this essay. But I think the simplest way to organize it is to start with your own story and answering the inquiry question, exploring it through your literacy stories. And then in the second part, create a transition that indicates, like how you're going to answer, like you can discover new things by using Barón and Grimm as a lens and approaching it in a first half, second half. I plan on playing around and writing my own essay this weekend. I've taught lens essays before, I've taught literacy narratives before, but I've never taught it exactly this way. And yet I do believe I learn more about my own experiences when I begin thinking about it in terms of dominant, mainstream dominant culture and the diversity that I value so highly. And so Barón and Grimm actually give me new things to think about. And there are many, many different parts of their essay that I think that would be relevant for me to understand my own acquisition of literacy, or how literacy has become survival for me, or how schools were set up for students like I was. Yeah, so there we go. And the other thing I want to add before we go on to, like identifying evidence is back to E. Shelley Reed. She says, write about what you know about, what you're curious about, what you're passionate about. What are the parts of your story that are most interesting to you? Remember, we are limiting literacy to language, writing, reading, your language that you use. This doesn't not have to be English. It can be a combination of languages. It can be the languages. Language and culture go together, so that matters. There are many literacies. There's technical literacy, computer literacy, cultural literacy, but we are narrowing our scope because we want to think in terms of literacy pedagogy related to, like, how do we learn how to read and write? And so language definitely fits in. If you speak different dialects, that would fit in, but just not, like other literacies. So anything to do with language, communication. So E. Shelley Reed says, write about what you know about, what you care about. Presumably, you know about yourself. You might even be curious about what things mean. Show, don't just tell, and adapt to your audience and purpose. What are some things that appeal to your audience? Remember, your audience is you. What style What would make somebody like you want to read a literacy narrative?
Maybe like more informal writing, not like informal, but writing like you're talking to the person, like conversation.
Yeah, definitely. Um, Academic writing can sound really um, awkward. And so that conversational writing, storytelling could be really, really valuable. Anything we could add to that idea? What are some characteristics of conversational writing that, besides, it sounds like we're talking to somebody?
Would we be allowed to use me in this essay?
Yeah, you've got
Like
to
me?
use first. You've got to use first person. It would be really strange if you talked about yourself in third person.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I have had students try that because we've been taught so often that we should never use first person. But if we're telling our own stories through our own point of view, how can't we use first person? What are some characteristics of conversational writing? If you're talking to your friends, how do you talk?
Yeah, like again, I think that unstructured writing is really conversational because usually in conversations you don't really like have an introduction and then like a thesis and then evidence backing up that all that and stuff. You really more so talk with emotion leading you.
Yeah, like lots of appeals to emotion. And you talked about unstructured writing, as in, like not the 5 paragraph essay format, but unstructured writing can also mean using a fragment every now and then, or a run on sentence. Because in conversational writing, we often use fragments. Even when you started talking, Hannah, you go, yeah, like those kinds of phrasing work with conversational writing. And so you kind of have to play with it. I know Kelly Linfor's essay had fragments, um, some poetic phrases, repetition, um, less conversational, but definitely interesting, appealing to the audience. Do you use slang when you speak with your friends?
Yeah,
Yeah. Profanity?
maybe.
Yeah. Nice answer, Sammy. Um, think about who your audience is. The slang you choose, the choice to use profanity or not, the choice to use fragments or not, or run-ons, they say something about who you are. You are going to be communicating your identity. I've talked a little bit about my literacy and my identity as a middle-aged white woman is my identity. Like the fact that my parents and my grandparents all went to college is part of my identity. And it's impossible for me to tell my story without including that, even the different places I lived, because my identity spending first through third grade in Hawaii influenced me enormously. It shaped me. And so you are going to be sharing aspects of your identity um, as part of this story. It makes your story make sense. It makes it stick together. And I know Callie Linford did that with her discussion of her disabilities, with her poverty, with the fact that she was raised by a single mom. Um, all of those made a difference. And so you've got to think about all those questions that Callie's asking. and how they might fit into your story. Because you're writing to a conversation of your, like to an audience of your peers, but an audience of your peers that don't know you. And so that complicates things a little bit.
I have a question.
Yeah, Sammy.
So I have two. The first one being, can we structure our essay like Callie Linford did?
Yeah.
Or just like, it doesn't have to be like how she did, but could it be different than a normal like rhetorical essay, you know?
I would hope that it would be different. You can definitely use Kelly Linfors as a model for how you want to structure it, because it was story on top of story on top of story with a little bit of analysis woven in to help it take shape. So that first half of your essay, you can even weave in Barone and Grimm into this unstructured essay if you want. That's a little, that could be really exciting and interesting, but it might be more complicated. So, like that's up to you.
And then my second question is, I'm just confused on how to like weave in like diversity, and I don't know how to like ask this question. I don't know. Like, what are we? I don't know. Like,
so I wouldn't have thought that I had diversity in my story, but as I'm reflecting on my story, I clearly do. Living in Hawaii, we didn't live on base. My dad was military. So almost all my neighbors were Japanese, Filipino, Hawaiian, Chinese. I mean, like that was my neighborhood when I grew up. Then I moved to Colorado and everybody was white. But because that was so normal to me, I can see that it influenced me a lot. But I wouldn't have thought about it because I remember Colorado a lot more than I did before. So you may not see it, but if you then transition out and say, like, here's what I learned about my literacy, is like literacy is survival to me because it gives me the opportunity to expand my world. And you understand, like this is just based on who you are, Sammy. And then you transition into the second half is like, this is really important, but now I want to analyze it through a lens of diversity. And some claims from Barone and Grimm, who wanted to teach their white tutors to embrace diversity. And here's a couple of things they say. And when I examine it through this lens, I learn this new thing. And so, like your story, you might not be able to draw the parallels with diversity that apparently I can do pretty easily, but like it's, like I had to think about it, and my story is unique, as all our stories are unique. So it might be easiest to structure it as, here's my story that's really creative, and now I want to learn something new. And just use that meta discourse to guide us into Barone and Grimm, because then when you start analyzing it through a lens of diversity like they have, I think you're going to come up with some new things. So that last part might seem more academic, but I'd love it if you could keep that conversational tone, because academic writing, academic learning does not need to sound academic all the time, if that makes sense. That was a good question. Any follow-up questions to that?
So do we just connect our story to a theme in Barron and Grimm, or do we also have to um, like use their quotes or like cite them?
Yes, you will need, I suggest that rather than using a lot of random quotes from Barone and Grimm, to make your paper more cohesive, you choose a single theme. I would almost certainly choose the theme of either theoretical versus productive diversity, or the impact of being yeah, I think I might have some quotes on mainstream or dominant because I fit into that, but I would definitely choose theoretical versus productive diversity. And I would choose key quotes, probably 4 or 5, but do you see how using one theme will enable me to draw one solid conclusion from my story instead of a lot of random surface type conclusions. Hannah, did that make sense?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Oh, good, good. I was like, I don't know if I'm making sense. It was a really good question. Yeah, and that's why I suggest dividing it into 2 parts, like first half, second half. First half is just your story, second half is Barone and Grimm, and then you just conversationally transition to, like, this is really interesting, and now I want to analyze it through this other lens that I might not have, like, that will enable me to learn something new. Because that is the goal of academic writing, is to add to the conversation. And I think we all can add to this conversation in different ways. Other questions?
I had a quick question about the analyzing evidence exercise with the Excel spreadsheet.
The one that we're not going to have time again to do.
Yes. How many pieces of evidence do you want us to analyze?
Well, I want you to only analyze from Barone and Grimm have 4 lessons.
Mhm.
Lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3, lesson 4. And so from only one lesson. And if we had, I was hoping we'd have 20 minutes and you would just work on it, and whatever you got done in 20 minutes would be the thing. But that is not going to happen. And so what I want to do is move that. I mean, I still want you to do this work, just because I saw in Hypothesis how difficult it was to identify evidence. Most students were, most of the comments, the annotations I saw that students were struggling with identifying evidence. And so I think that it's important for us to do that, especially since we will be, when we're done with this essay, you're doing a research essay. And so being able to identify and use and evaluate your own evidence is going to be super valuable. What I am doing, since there's only 9 minutes left to class, is I'm pushing this back to next week. So,
Okay.
So easy. You don't have to think about it yet, Elia.
Well, thank you for answering my question.
Yeah. I know. One more thing that you don't have to do. Any other questions that you have for me?
Will we still have the lens project due even if this is pushed back?
The introduction, I'm probably pushing back the introduction, quite honestly.
Thank you.
Let me tell you one other thing. For the research project, you have the option of extending, like you're choosing a theme from Barone and Grimm. It might be colorblindness, it might be how universities are set up. and they often marginalize students of color, or they're very mainstream, dominant culture is woven into the systems. So you are going to be analyzing your experiences through a lens from Barone and Graham. And then your research essay is going to be an extension of that, where you're just saying, I want to learn more about the benefits of multiculturalism and productive diversity. Or I want to learn more about systemic racism in literacy instruction. And so you're not starting from scratch. It's very much an extension. And so because that's what I'm doing with this essay, it's going to give us the opportunity to gain about a week, and it's going to give us the opportunity to gain about a week, and I'll be able to push the deadline back. So all good news. Maybe. Any other questions on the essay or the glossary? Really, really good questions. I appreciate this a lot. I hope this has clarified a lot of things. And Monday, we're back identifying evidence. We're going to do it first, just to make sure that we have time. Okay? Have a really great weekend, and yeah, have a really great weekend. And I'll see you all on Monday.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, Kiana.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good.